3 days ago, my daughter called me crying. She said she couldn't pay the rent. After hearing all that shit, I told her I wouldn't help her. Then I went to Miami and spent $18,000 getting diamonds in my teeth. But I want you to know something before you decide what kind of mother I am. Stra. For 30 years to my family, I wasn't a mother. I was an emergency fund with feelings. And the day I said no, everything changed for them and for me. By the time you finish listening to me, you'll understand exactly why I did it. And if you're honest with yourself, you might also understand why you've spent years doing the same thing I did for decades. My name is Margaret. I'm 73 years old. I've been divorced for 42 years. Everything I have, and I have quite a lot, I built alone. No inheritance, no husband, no one to rescue me. Just work, silence, and the right decisions made at the most uncomfortable moments. When my daughter called that Tuesday morning, I was drinking coffee on the patio. Green as always. The clothes, the coffee, the plants. I like quiet reminders. I answered on the second ring. Mom, I need your help. It's serious. That's how it started. No hello, no asking how I was doing. Straight to the point. Which always tells me the situation has been building for weeks and that I am the last resort, not the first call. How much? I asked. $4,000. Just for this month. I'll pay you back in... No, I said. There was a silence, then the crying. And behind the crying, something I recognized immediately because I've been hearing it for decades. The soft manipulation. The kind that doesn't know it's manipulation. The kind that comes from people who love you, but learned very early that love with you has a fixed price. How can you say no to me? We're your family. I didn't respond to that. Some phrases don't deserve a response. They only deserve silence. But what I didn't say in that moment, what I kept quiet, is what you really need to hear. After she hung up, my son sent me a text. My son is 48 years old. He owns a business I co-financed 11 years ago. The message said, Mom, what you did isn't right. She really needs help. I replied with 3 words. I know, son. And I didn't add anything else. That night I didn't sleep well, not because I felt guilty. I processed guilt years ago. But because there was something I still hadn't finished putting into words, even for myself, something I was about to understand, but that hadn't taken shape yet. I got up at 3 a.m. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. I turned on the light. I opened the banking app. I searched for my daughter's name. I entered the amount. My finger was a millimeter away from the confirm button. I didn't press it. I turned off the phone. I went back to bed. And in that moment, I knew something was over. Not the love. Love doesn't end. But something else did. Something I had been holding in my hands for 30 years and had finally let go. To understand what happened that night, I need to tell you what happened over 3 decades. When my children were small, I worked 16 hours a day. Not because I enjoyed it, but because there were 2 kids to feed, rent to pay, and no man willing to stay long enough to help. So I worked, and while I worked, I sent them money. And when they grew up, I kept sending them money. Because money was the only form of presence that distance allowed me. And this is what no one sees when a mother always says yes. My daughter turned 20. I paid for her college. At 25, I gave her the down payment on her first apartment. At 30, I lent her money for a business that failed in 18 months. At 35, I paid for her wedding. At 38, I covered her rent for 2 months straight because her partner had left. At 40, she called me crying. Same song, different verse. And what I didn't tell her that Tuesday, what I've never told her, is that I had already paid that rent before, in 2019, in 2017, in 2014, in 2011, 4 times in 12 years. And every time, the same promise, that it would be the last time, that she was learning, that she was going to change. And I believed her. Or I pretended to believe her. I was never sure which. There's a dinner I remember with a clarity that still makes me uncomfortable. It was the year I turned 68. My children organized a birthday dinner. The grandkids were there. There were flowers on the table. My son raised his glass and said something about how incredible it was to have such a generous mother. Everyone applauded. I smiled. And in that moment, something small and very quiet shifted inside me. That's when I understood something that took me 30 years to see. Generous. They didn't say intelligent. They didn't say brave. They didn't say they admired me for what I had built. They said generous. And I understood at that table with those flowers and those glasses what I was to my family. An emergency fund with feelings, a resource with a birthday. I didn't say it. I smiled and drank my wine. But something changed that night. Not dramatically, not all at once. The way important things change, slowly, quietly, without announcing themselves. In the months that followed, I started to observe, not to judge, to observe. I noticed how many of my children's calls started with a need. I noticed that when I called for no reason, just to talk, the conversations were short. I noticed that when someone mentioned my properties or my income, my children's eyes lit up in a specific way. Not with pride, with expectation. But that wasn't what hurt the most. What hurt the most was understanding that I had built it, that I had taught them that love looks like money. I taught them that when they cry, the check appears. I taught them that mom is a permanent safety net, not with bad intentions, with all the love in the world. But the lessons learned without words are the hardest ones to unlearn. It took me 2 more years to do something with that observation, and what I did was simple. I said no. The first time was with my son. He asked for money to expand the business I had financed. I told him to find a bank. He looked at me like I had said something in a foreign language. It took him 2 weeks to call me again. But he called, and the business grew anyway. With my daughter, it took longer. There's something in a daughter's voice that works like a master key. She's known her whole life exactly what to say, not out of malice, but because she learned from a very young age. That's how you get things from me. Let's go back to the Tuesday of the call. The day after the night in front of the mirror, I called the dental clinic in Miami. I had been putting off that appointment for months. Diamond inlays, not on all my teeth, on 2. Something subtle. Something you only see when you truly smile. $18,000, paid in cash. Not with guilt, not with doubt. With the same clarity I bring to any decision about my body, my time, or my money. The esthetician who prepared me for the appointment looked at me with a mix of fascination and confusion. "Why the teeth?" she asked. I told her, "Because I wear them. Because no one can take them from me. Because when I smile, they're mine." She nodded. I think she understood. They're not luxury. They're autonomy. I bought them because for 40 years I postponed the things I wanted to pay for the things others needed. And one day I decided that was over, not with anger. Without anger, actually. With a kind of cold, luminous clarity that only comes when you've spent enough time looking at yourself honestly in the mirror. When my daughter found out, and of course she found out, the phone rang at 7 that evening. How can you spend $18,000 on your damn teeth and tell me you have no money for my rent? I didn't tell her. I never said I had no money. I told her I had the money and chose not to give it to her. There's an enormous difference between those two things. One makes you a victim. The other makes you responsible. There were more calls. My son mediated. Then silence. 2 weeks of silence that felt simultaneously like a punishment and like the first deep breath I had taken in months. But here's the part no one expects when I tell this story. My daughter paid the rent, alone. She reorganized her expenses. She talked to her landlord. She negotiated a payment plan. Things I had been preventing her from learning to do because I always showed up with a check before she had to figure them out. My son, for his part, stopped calling me for my opinion on every business decision. He started making his own choices, some bad, some good, all his. I don't take credit for that growth. I only recognize that my absence, at least financially, created a space that only they could fill. 2 weeks ago, my daughter called me. No crying, no urgency, just to talk. She told me she had signed her kids up for a new activity. She asked what I had cooked. She told me she'd seen a movie that reminded her of me. It was a 40-minute conversation about nothing important and everything that matters. When I hung up, I sat still for a moment. Then I went to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror. I smiled. And for the first time in a long time, what I saw reflected back wasn't a woman who holds things up. It was a woman who exists in her own right. The diamonds caught the light from the lamp. 2 small, steady points. They're not a symbol of selfishness. They're a symbol that I count too. That my 73 years deserve something that isn't functional, useful, or available. That I can love my children deeply and at the same time refuse to be the cushion they fall onto when they don't learn to hold themselves up. There are 2 questions I've been asking myself since that night in front of the mirror. I'll leave them with you. How much of what you give your family is love? And how much is fear that they'll need you less if they stop needing you? And if tomorrow you stopped solving the problems of the people you love, what would they discover they're capable of?